Hello, I'm Michael Gross, host of the B&O Railroad Museum Television Network. I am sitting in the original Mount Clair station of the B&O Railroad Museum. This station, built in 1851, and the 24 acres surrounding it, was the major hub of the B&O during America's Civil War. The B&O Railroad became the Union's most important supply line. It was here that locomotives were built to haul troops, artillery, and supplies. At the beginning of the war, however, B&O President John Work Garrett made no secret of his support for his Southern friends. Were it not for Confederate troops causing such severe damage to the B&O's rail lines, bridges, and equipment in the early months of the war, Garrett might have easily thrown his power behind the fledgling Confederacy, thus cutting the nation's capital off from the North. Abraham Lincoln, recognizing the importance of the B&O, personally summoned Mr. Garrett to the White House. By the end of the war, 4 years later, the B&O was known as Mr. Lincoln's Railroad. At the beginning of the Civil War, both the North and South claimed America's first railroad, the B&O, as their own. The B&O possessed 236 locomotives, 128 passenger coaches, 3,451 rail cars, and 513 miles of railroad, mostly in the South. In April 1861, Garrett received an anonymous letter containing threats of pro-Confederates promising to destroy railroad tracks, burn bridges, and demolish B&O buildings if the B&O continued to transport U.S. soldiers. Later in the summer, Secretary of War Simon Cameron warned Garrett that transporting Southern soldiers constituted a treasonous act. During the entire war, Garrett's B&O came under continual attack by both sides. On April 19, 1861, 6 days after Fort Sumter surrendered, it was confirmed that the B&O would transport soldiers from the 6th Massachusetts Infantry from Baltimore to the city of Washington, D.C. The Southern sympathizers protested, and the militia forces of Charlestown, Virginia, threatened to destroy railroad bridges at Harper's Ferry. Garrett refused to back down from the threats and continued with the order to haul the troops to D.C. By the time the troops had reached Camden Station, having marched across Baltimore from President Street Station, a rock-throwing pro-Southern mob had engaged them on Pratt Street in Baltimore and caused the war's first bloodshed. Where did the first deaths of the American Civil War take place? The opening move of the Civil War was a massive series of raids conducted by Stonewall Jackson. By the end of 1861, 23 B&O railroad bridges had been burned, 102 miles of telegraph line were cut down, 36.5 miles of track were destroyed, 42 locomotives were burned, 14 locomotives were captured, and 386 rail cars stolen and destroyed. Through these actions, operations on the B&O Railroad were completely shut down for 10 months. It was not until the end of March 1862 that service on the B&O Railroad was restored, and even then train movements were sporadic and subject to frequent stoppages, derailments, capture, and attack. Baltimore, with many pro-Southern citizens, was occupied by federal troops throughout the war. By the summer of 1861, troops, artillery, and forts were placed in various squares and parks all around the city, including the Mount Clair estate, the 18th century home of the Carroll family. The position at Mount Clair was called Camp Carroll and remained throughout the duration of the war. The pastures west of Mount Clair were used by the U.S. Army as a cavalry training camp. In the fall of 1862, the 13th Cavalry Regiment of Pennsylvania were at Camp Carroll, which was later renamed Camp Cheeseboro. On April 19, 1861, the first deaths of the American Civil War occurred in the Pratt Street riot on Pratt Street in Baltimore, Maryland. In 2011 through 2015, the B&O Railroad Museum will celebrate the anniversary of the Civil War. The museum holds the largest collection of Civil War railroad equipment in existence. This is Michael Gross. Thanks for watching the B&O Railroad Museum Television Network.
I think there's nothing much to say about a system that's seen its
Coming up, events at the B&O Railroad Museum and Ellicott City Station. Proudly sponsored by Amtrak.
Thomas the Tank Engine will visit B&O Railroad Museum April 23rd through 25th and April 30th with a trainload of family fun. Kids of all ages can enjoy a ride with Thomas the Tank Engine and meet Sir Topham Hatt. There'll be storytelling, a visit to Imagination Station, and more. Tickets are on sale right now at ticketweb.com or call 866-468-7630. Don't miss Day Out with Thomas, the Celebration Tour 2010.